welcome all of you to Changemaker 20 Summit, to this wonderful talk on a new kind of knowing. Welcome, Dr. Sugata and Purnima, Jayashree, and Dr. Simi Mishra. So, as per the agenda, Dr. Sugata, I think for the first talk, we would like to invite you to come and deliver your address on the end of knowing.
Okay, thank you, Shamudeep. I have just a couple of ideas to say. I think the way we can do this is that let me present a few ideas about what I think is happening because of basically the digital world. And then we take it from there as with each of the speakers commenting on where we might go next. So, the session itself is called A New Kind of Knowing. And where I'm going to start from is my old experiment, which perhaps some of you would remember. It's a long time ago, 24 years ago, the experiment called Hole in the Wall. And those were times when I had kind of exposed children to a street side computer with the internet on it. And we saw that children would actually, in unsupervised groups, figure out things for themselves. And everybody was very surprised, mind you, at that time. But who is teaching them and how are they doing all this? And I spent many years trying to find that out. And what we really saw was that groups of unsupervised learners in the presence of the internet can self-organize their learning and learn almost anything by themselves. Okay, I'm not going to go over the entire story because, it's well documented. But the important thing is that groups of unsupervised learners can learn things by themselves over the internet. Now that in 1999 was just a curiosity because people said, well, where is the internet? Everybody in India doesn't have the internet, or everybody in the developed world, even in the developed world in those days, did not have the internet. But jump now to 2023. Most people on the planet have the internet 24/7. So now if I apply that old result of 1999 to this new world of 2023, what do we get? Well, people should be self-organizing around the internet to learn just about anything. Are they doing that? When I look around in almost any country, I spent, my life in basically three countries, India, the UK, and USA. And I see almost exactly the same thing happening there. Everybody has got a phone in their hand all the time. Everybody, whether it's on a bus, on a train, or whatever. So what are they doing? Well, you could say they're looking at things. Obviously, that's the first step. What else could they be doing if they're looking at phone? They're looking at something. So what is it they're looking at? Usually, you might say messages from their friends. Maybe a video. Maybe some other material. Maybe they're searching for things or looking up things on Google. Maybe they're looking at a map. It's incredible how many things we can do with these. So if you look at a train compartment or a bus or something like that, and you suddenly see everybody with these devices, you see the understanding, you suddenly understand the meaning of the word immersion, of being immersed in information. And we know that will produce learning. I know from my results that almost anything can be learned like that, provided you want to learn it. So the only thing, the only prerequisite is the wanting to learn. Once you have the wanting to learn, we are in a world where we can learn it. Okay. It's no longer a world where you say, where will I find a class? Where will I find a teacher? Where will I find books? You don't need any of that. Now, what does the old education system do in the meanwhile? But this entire generation, where everybody is looking at their mobile phones all the time, has to compulsorily go through the old system. So what is the old system? That for the first 17 years of your life, you will be given knowledge, which you're meant to keep inside your head. Knowledge about all sorts of things, in the hope that just in case in your life you need some knowledge, it will be there inside. This is what education is right now. And it came from a time when, at the time of need, you have nothing to look up. You have only your brain. So you have to figure it out yourself. And that was why for 17 years, all this stuff is pumped in. That's the old system. Just in case. So to give you an example, LCM of numbers, least common multiple. You will remember with horror that we were all taught an LCM. What for? Are we ever going to need an LCM anywhere? Maybe if this was the 19th century, you might need it somewhere. But we're never going to need it. Okay, it was taught to us just in case. So now let's move to another idea. If you have a learner or a group of learners with these mobile phones, connected devices, could they pretend to be educated? And once again, if you think about it, there are many people, I'm sure you'll be able to think of people where when they talk, you say, well, he doesn't actually know that, he must have just looked it up. And then I would stop and say, what are we trying to say? And people will say, well, he doesn't really know. He only looked it up. So really know and only looked it up are two different things. I wonder what the difference is between really know and looked it up. So what if they looked it up? You could walk up to just about anybody on the street and say, I'll give you 25 rupees if you can tell me what the speed of sound is. About 10 years ago, people would have thought you were mad. Right now, no problem. He'll just pull out his phone and say, okay, here it is. Give me my 25 rupees. Okay. And then you would say, oh, but he doesn't really know. He just looked it up. We have a problem there. So you can pretend to be educated. That sounds terrible, isn't it? Oh, he's not really educated. He's just pretending to be educated. He just looks up things on the phone all the time. But I wonder, in our old education, the one that I went through, how many times do I also pretend to be educated? When I say, Shakespeare said, blah, blah, blah. How many times is it that that's the only line from Shakespeare that I remember? So, this whole idea of what is knowing, what is real knowing, and what is looking up, we need a serious re-look at it. On the other hand, we are in a world where if you need to know something, you can look it up right there and then. Not just in case, but just in time. Maybe you never heard of something before. Maybe you even knew about a problem. But when you're faced with that problem, you and your friends quickly pull out their phones And you need an ability. You need an ability to learn really quickly, just in time. So what I'm trying to say is that education needs to move from just in case to just in time. What will it take to do that? An education system where learning is more important than knowing. Okay, just think about it. It will sound terrible. Learning is more important than knowing. If we use this, we can replace huge amounts of material in the old curricula and just get rid of them. Because you don't need to know that. You need to be able to look it up when you need it. And guess what? I'm not the first person to say this by any stretch of the imagination. Albert Einstein said this. I don't know how he thought of it over 100 years ago. He said, I don't need to know everything. I need to know where to look it up when I need it. But we're in the world where that is possible for all of us. No matter what our social strata is, no matter where we live, the internet has leveled the playing field. Can we take use of that? Can we take the advantage from that? If we can, then we have the beginnings of a new education. It's going to be very hard for governments to move because it's a very difficult move, moving from just in case to just in time. But that move has to happen because it's already happening. I'll leave you with that. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Shu. Our panelists would be, our first panelist is Jayashree Oberoi. Jayashree has an extensive and diverse background in both national and international NGOs and governments in India and the United States. Jayashree is a teacher at heart, and she's worked in various domains, including school development, environmental conservation, social emotional learning, people development, and project management. Her professional journey began as a research assistant at the Wildlife Institute of India, and she has gained experience at organizations such as Worldwide Fund for Nature India and the New England Aquarium in Boston. And for the past 12 years, Jayashree has held leadership roles at Akanksha Foundation, including as a school leader and senior director of schools in Pune. The next panelist we have tonight is Purnima Garg. Purnima Garg is the country director at Room to Read India. She joined Room to Read in India in 2011 and strengthened Room to Read India's strategies and processes, developing best practices to inform worldwide approaches. As a leader, she brings in more than 2 decades of diverse leadership experience in both non-profit and for-profit sectors, primarily into education and business management. Over the years, under Purnima's leadership, Room to Read India has embarked on several key initiatives. These include articulating the policy and acts drawn for employee welfare and child protection, and being awarded a Great Place to Work for 9 consecutive years and a Great Place to Work for women for the first time in 2022. She was conferred with the title of the Phenomenal She in 2019 by Indian National Bar Association for her contribution in advocating to establish ICC within organizations under the Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act. Our third panelist for tonight is Dr. Simya Mishra. Dr. Simya Mishra is a talent development and D&I catalyst. She's a societal change catalyst advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion goals to create a more equitable outcomes across the talent lifecycle. Her focus areas are inclusion and diversity talent grooming, environment of belonging, growth and development, and strategic partnerships. Dr. Mishra is an IBM certified instructional designer. She is an experienced learning and training management consultant with a strong background in training design, development, delivery, and competency development. And last, but definitely not the least, a final panelist for the evening is Dr. Sugata Mitra or for you, it's morning. Uh, Dr. Mitra is a prominent Indian computer scientist and educational theorist renowned for his groundbreaking hole in the wall experiment, about which we've just heard. Also, as an aside, this experiment was featured in NPR's TED Radio Hour, demonstrated that children in rural Indian slums with no prior computer exposure could teach themselves a wide range of subjects from character mapping to advanced topics like DNA replication independently and collaboratively using computers placed in kiosks, and hence the name hole in the wall. Dr. Mitra's vision transcends conventional education systems, highlighting the potential of technology-driven, self-directed learning. Dr. Mitra's impactful career extends to his role as Professor Emeritus at NIIT University, where he has developed curricula and pedagogy, and his 13-year tenure at Newcastle University, including a visiting professorship at MIT Media Lab. Once again, I'll just read out the topic to the panel discussion. Exploring the concept of lifelong learning in the information age, moving beyond factual knowledge in an era of infinite learning, which is what the power of the internet in each one of our pockets has truly given us. I'll start by going to each one of you one by one, and then we will take a round of closing comments from all of you. And if any of you want to make any additional points, please feel free to jump in. My first question would be to Jayashree. Jayashree, in your opinion, how do you think the internet and this instant access to information that we've been talking about, right? The entire power of the internet is available with us for just-in-time learning, like Dr. Mitra said. How do you think this instant access to information has reshaped the way we learn?
Sure. Thank you, Soumyadeep. Once again, it's my pleasure to be with this panel, and especially with Dr. Sugata Mitra here. Just going back to as a learner, and way back almost 12 years ago, when we first started talking about how children learn, hole in the wall experiment was one of the stories that we screened for all the teachers and say, here is the power. When we give it to children in their own hand, they can learn on their own. So our role is something different. So I just wanted to start with that. So I think with the internet and the now access to all the technology we have, who's learning, how are they learning, and what are they learning are the three things that have changed significantly in the last few years. What I mean by who's learning is, I just want to tell a little story that during COVID, when we assessed that our children come from underprivileged background in urban poverty areas. And they did have about 85% of the parents did have cell phones. So we said, okay, we want to get into online learning with them. And social emotional learning was one of the things, along with content learning, that was happening. And very soon we realized, and we started to get the stories that when we were doing the sessions for the children, there were mothers sitting with the children and learning the same strategies that were being taught to the children. And that just opened, a learning for us that who is learning is now, it's not restricted only to the learner who comes to the classroom, but the minute the access is there for anyone in the world, remote areas, any background, any demographic, any age, no matter who the learner is, they have access to learning. So I think that is one big domain and one big change that has happened. The second one is, what are they learning? And like Dr. Mitra said, that what you want to learn is depending on the learner, and it can be available to them at any time. Another quick story, that way back when I wanted to learn German, I had to go, change 2 trains and go at 9 o'clock and come back, pretty late, and all of that I had to do. And just last year, I realized one of my daughters, I have 2 daughters, and one of them was learning Japanese at home. So what are they learning is again decided by the learner at their own pace and how they want to learn. So I think that is what has changed again. And the third one is how they want to learn. I already talked about the time and the space. So I think at their own pace, which language they want to use, whether it's audio visual, there are multiple ways they are able to choose the style, choose the space, choose the pace at which they want to learn. So it's become a lot more personalized from the learner's point of view, as well as the the style or the method in which they want to use and the pace they want to use. I think what we generally talk about internet and the consumption of the information is more from the information part of it. What we don't usually talk about is the skill that is being developed over the period of time for the learner. Just very recently, a group of students interacted with another group of students from Germany, and then they had an opportunity to meet, and that group presented today. I think the whole point of, when we talk about 4Cs and 4Cs being developed when children are learning with each other and through all of this, I think the availability of internet, availability of technology has made it possible for children. There's collaboration across the world that's happening between them, a communication. There's a lot of critical thinking in terms of what information do we consume, how do we discern, how do we really see what is authentic, what is being, what needs to be questioned. All of these skills are being tested and they're learning over a period of time. So there is a lot of skill development is also happening while they are using the technology and resources here. So I think just summarizing again, who, what, and how are the three areas that are being dictated by, or these are the areas that are affected by internet in a lot of ways, positive ways, and that is what is important to look into.
All right,
Thank
who's learning, what are they learning, and how do they want to learn? All right. Purnima, would you like to add something to this? How has the internet and access to information reshaped how we learn?
Thank you, Somadeep. And, I would just like to start with, something that really provoked in me after hearing Dr. Mitra. And, it's really an ability to learn throughout life is a conscious metacognitive activity. But this becomes a unique human feat when we look at the context we live in. And in the world of information flux, we've just talked about it, amidst of the avalanches of information to the individual mind, one needs to really discipline the learning. One needs to discipline to first discern between authentic knowledge and the popular perception. And that's what even Dr. Mitra was talking about, that if you have just got to know something, or you really, do you know it, or it was just there in your brain system, whether the old methods of education still kind of really puts that knowledge, or it's just about flipping or screening through something. And in this era of infinite learning, the focus has shifted from mere factual knowledge to a broader set of skills, attributes that enable an individual to navigate a ever-changing landscape. And we need to understand whether it is a student or a young student or an adolescent or an adult. For all of us, this is an ever-changing landscape. We continue to use theories, like hole in the wall. This has been premise of some of our work that we have done in education, including the work that Room to Read does when we talk about that how a book could attract a child to come and read, without even a teacher guiding it. So even just putting across that book in the room really attracts the child. So I think somewhere it's about how we are choosing skills over the factual knowledge. And in this era wherein we are talking about 21st century skills, the emphasis has shifting from developing skills such as critical thinking, problem solving, creativity. These are life skills. So, collaboration, communication, and these skills will provide individuals with ability to process and synthesize information, analyze complex situations, engage in meaningful conversations, meaningful interaction. So I think, I would just say that it is not about accumulating information. this new knowledge that we are talking about is making lifelong learners, is all about embracing change, developing skills for the changing landscape, um, a ever evolving world. The context continues to change for us, and that's the new era of learning that I would say we are into. Yeah. Thank you.
Dr. Simi, would you like to add your thoughts to this question?
Absolutely, sure. So I think after having kind of listened to everybody, there's not too much left to say. But I'd still like to kind of, like focus on the fact that development of the information society and the widespread diffusion of information and technology are giving rise to, new opportunities for learning, and they challenge the established views and practices regarding how teaching and learning should be organized and carried out. So my focus is going to be around these parameters, and at the same time, I think globalization has put a lot of stress, and specifically the way that the world economy is going after the COVID intensified competition. We see that many countries are turning production towards highly value added, knowledge intensive products and services, which request high levels of skills and labor force. So, lifelong learning, therefore, just becomes a concept that offers the prospect of a radical new approach. And this is exactly where I think universities and higher educational institutes and even schools are kind of, grappling with. To answer successfully all these challenges, in the opinion of most of the specialists, traditional universities and schools and our traditional ways of learning must transform themselves by adopting lifelong learning systems. These systems will actually be so transformative that universities and colleges and schools are now looking into strategies and policies which can implement flexible academic frameworks, innovative pedagogical approaches, and new forms of assessments and institutional collaboration. Just to kind of give an example, if I look into the EU actually offers a lifelong learning program for European Union, and it was stipulated way back in 2006. Nothing happened there. But the lifelong learning program acted as a catalyst for structural change through support in policy development, cooperation, and even mobility across the European Union. Now, this is at, about, we are in 2022. Now we see that European Union has actually adopted this particular program at an 80% level, and it is delivered not only through the EU through a like a spinal cord, but a network of about 40 national agencies have come together to manage it, and it is now a humongous 900 million per year euro kind of a program that has been kind of laid out. So this kind of talks about the scale of and the cooperation and the collaboration that can kind of be possible. It also kind of talks about the fact that it not only enhances learning, but it also enhances social inclusion, active citizenship, personality development, and of course, yes, directly impacts employability. So those are certain things that I felt that we should be kind of conscious about. And in my mind, lifelong learning actually is defined as a learning that, of course, yes, is pursued throughout the life. But there are four pillars that emerge very strongly in my mind. One is, of course, something that Dr. Sugata Mitra, Dr. Jayashree just kind of talked about, learning to know. This is, just an academic pursuit of mastering learning tools rather than acquisition of structured knowledge. The second is that, how do I take this learning and apply it to certain aspects, that is learning to do. So equipping people for the types of work, skilling for now, for the future, including innovation and adaptation of learning to future work environments does kind of, come through this. The third type of learning to me is learning to live together and with others peacefully, resolving conflict, collaborating, discovering each other's cultures, fostering, community capabilities, looking at, individual competence and capacity, bringing about, larger economic resilience and social inclusion. And the last one that I see is learning to be, which is basically education contributing to person's own development, which is individual, the mind, the body, the intelligence, aesthetic appreciation, spirituality, etc. So with that, I think, the kind of work that is happening, the direction that we are kind of, going towards, the diversity of the programs and the unique operations that are kind of emerging right now, I think it's a new kind of a learning where knowledge is not scanty, but what to do with that knowledge and when to acquire it, how to apply it, those are the focal areas.
I was just summarizing what Dr. Simi said. She spoke about academic institutions and the need for taking this kind of learning approach into academic institutions. And then she also spoke about the different dimensions of an individual development. And that thought segues into the next question that I wanted to put first to Purnima and then to Jayashri. How can individuals embrace lifelong learning to remain relevant in their careers and in their personal lives? Purnima, if you would like to go first, please.
Yeah. So I think it's very important that we first realize that lifelong learning is a journey and it's not a destination. I think it's the mindset and a continuous process that evolves with our personal and professional growth. It's really important to lay that foundation first, and by consistently seeking out new knowledge, skill, experiences, one can adopt to change circumstances. Because we just talked about how world is a evolving landscape for all of us, be it young children, adolescent children, adults. So we need to remain relevant in the current circumstances and to lead a fulfilling life. And some of the strategies that I could talk about to make sure that individuals can use to integrate in their learning journey, which is really cultivating a growth mindset. Because we know while a loose access can be dangerous, however, how do you utilize that? How do you cultivate that growth mindset, which means believing in the abilities and the intelligence that can be developed through dedication and hard work. Setting clear goals is something which is very important. Because, again, lifelong learning is a continuous process. So one needs to be really understanding their actual goals. Creating learning plans, which is really strategizing the resource, the timelines, the structured approach, staying organized, then diversifying learning sources, which is very important, wherein we talk about our conventional education system to the newer ways of learning now, wherein different sources, including online courses, now one, and in our days we used to learn through books a lot of we used to have encyclopedias. We didn't have Googles or chat GPTs to tell us if we had to find something. Our mothers told us to go to a encyclopedia, which also was organized alphabetically, and you had to go and then look for it. So I would just say that from books to learning, to a podcast, from a webinar, from a workshop, to seminars, this platform, the learning platforms, have diversified. And then for people to remain relevant, it's very important that what is that right source of learning that one is really leveraging. Different medium these days, we have these Coursera, edX, Academy, a wide range of courses on various topic are available on these online portals. Now, the most important thing here is to continue to stay curious. and I think curiosity, we know what it can do to learning. So it's a very important thing. Cultivating a curious mind is very important, because curiosity fuels the desire to learn and discover. And none of the scientists would have really been able to do or discover what they discovered if they were not curious. So we all know that any learning has to be fueled by curiosity, and one needs to do all efforts to make sure that fueling continues in life. Networking and collaboration these days works really, really well. That how do you kind of collaborate with like-minded uh, organization, get into new insights, opportunities for growth, and how do you collaborate and network in the right direction. Embrace failure is another important aspect, I would say, to stay very relevant in your career and your personal lives, because most of the time failures are more associated with careers than personal lives. It's very important that we are not afraid to make mistakes and encounter challenges, and really I think failures are the biggest teachers for us. So that's another thing. And then balancing the depth and the breadth that we choose to focus upon, which is of knowledge, by exploring different subjects. This interdisciplinary, approach can foster creativity, innovation. So that's largely the broad strategies that I thought will be very relevant for our audience to understand, that how it's relevant to be to be a lifelong learner in their career and personal lives. Yeah, I mean, it actually leads to a fulfilling life.
Thank you,
Thank
Purnima.
you.
Thank you, Purnima. Started by lifelong learning is a journey and not a destination. And I want to come back to this thought. There's a lot more other things. I'll come back to follow up thoughts. But first, can I take this same question to Jayashree, please? Would like to hear your thoughts on this?
Sure. I think Purnima has covered it a lot, and I loved many of the concepts that she talked about to start to think about this as a journey and not a destination, or it's very, very important to think about it that way. Want to add to that, by my personal feeling is that it's not a choice anymore for us. It's a need, and maybe just anybody can guess my age. Like maybe in 70s, nothing changed for 10 years, and the transport remained the same. There were no cell phones. There was one telephone that we had, which was used very, very sparingly. So all of that, and nothing happened in 10 years. And if you see last 10 years, our lives have completely changed. I mean, if I have to just list the innovations that have come, not in just technology, but everything else, if we don't stay current, if we don't stay informed, or if we don't get used to, even as a consumer, one is being the creative and the creator of it, where there's a different learning that's happening, and you're staying at the forefront of making this available for people, and on the other hand, you being the consumer. In all of this entire range, you are the learner. And if we don't stay at the forefront of this, there is somebody else who has to fill in that for us. Like there's no choice one way or the other. So by just summarizing that, we don't have a choice, first of all, and it's for good. I mean, again, the innate nature of human is being curious, wanting to learn something, and the important part is what we derive out of it. It is not just for being able to use something for our needs, but it's also fulfilling the change that we experience by learning something new. It's the positive feelings, or the gratifying feeling that you get when you learn something new. Again, I love to share some anecdotes and stories here. That very recently we started working with some of the headmasters of schools, and they've done 30, 35 years of their service. And when we are working with them again, when they're learning either even to use new technology or using new features of their technology and cell phones, that this is It could be just making simple videos, or some features that not usually used, even to that, or some of the new pedagogy and things that they could do.
I think my observation fully echoes with whatever Dr. Purnima said, Dr. Jayashree said. Both of them have grains of truth in it. What I could only add to it is that yes, the joy of learning, supersedes everything. But applicability and a lot of the joy quotient actually comes not only just from the source or the joy of learning, but being able to apply, being able to look at the data, being able to analyze, being able to kind of make new meanings of it. And that is where, when you kind of go into a continuous iterative process, which is aided by technology, which is aided by information which is kind of retrieved either through databases or MOOCs that Dr. Purnima talked about. So all of those are data points and knowledge resources that are available to us. But what we make out of it and how we apply it actually kind of dictates the way in which and the direction in which humanity is going to go. That's going to be like shaping very, very differently. And with that, I would say that whatever we learn, whatever we look into, however we analyze, there is also an element of responsibility that we need to kind of also cater to, specifically when we look into what's happening right now, and specifically talking about AI. There is a lot of conflict that is happening, and I think ethical learning, just like ethical hacking, is going to be the norm. So looking forward to exciting times ahead of us. I think we are at a tipping point where we are going to make a leap into the next level of learning, and I'm very, very excited, and at the same time a little skeptical about what lies in front of us. But the shift is something that I'm very, very passionate about, and I'm 100% sure that the world that we create after a few hiccups is going to be inclusive economically, socially, as well as culturally. With that, Shom, I hand it over to you.
Thank you. So I think one of the things that we all agreed on over here for this particular question was that lifelong learning is a journey and it's not a destination. And I want to take that question to Dr. Mitra. I want to know your thoughts, sir, on this. Is lifelong learning solely the means to an end, or does it also contribute to personal fulfillment, a person's individual well-being?
Well, the idea of lifelong learning itself used to be new. It used to be something that people sort of said, oh, it's something I can do. So even after school and after university, I can go on learning, etc., etc. But I think that the word itself is somewhat old-fashioned now, because everybody is doing lifelong learning. Anybody who has a cell phone connected to the internet is doing lifelong learning anyway, whether he or she understands that is what they're doing or not. The question is, what is the quality of that? And which I think Purnima sort of mentioned, that what is the quality of that learning, and is it directed towards a goal or whatever? So I think, first of all, we must understand that a few terms like lifelong learning have now become obsolete. They don't really mean anything. Okay, to the generation that's grown up with internet connected devices, they won't understand what you mean if you say lifelong learning. They will also not understand if you say that you need to know something in advance, so that one day if you need it, you're going to use it. So I'm going to simply say that lifelong learning is already happening. All that we need to do is to figure out how to measure it and how to see if there is a particular desired direction, or are there undesirable directions, and is there a way to control that?
I think, Purnima, you had also touched upon this, the right medium of learning, being able to understand what is the right kind of knowledge, and Dr. Mitra also alluded to that. So I want to know your thoughts on how could we do that. Is, say, for example, is effective search on Google, right? So Google search is something that we all do, and it's a verb, right? Just go Google it. And I come from a marketing background, and in marketing, That's considered to be the pinnacle of the success of a brand when you start to use it as a generic verb. So, but is effective searching on Google, for example, just to take one particular example, is it a skill that should be taught formally in order to ensure the quality of this kind of learning?
Well, I think this is a very debatable thing, and I'm not sure. Maybe Dr. Mitra can probably talk about it. Whether searching on Google is an effective medium of learning or not. So, again, learning and knowing are two very different things. And from any search engine, whether it is Google or anything, you could know certain facts, but you may not be able to learn. But I open this question to other panelists also with their vast experience. What do they think? Because to me, this is this really a skill, or this is a skill which is required? So over to the other panelist. Yes, sir, please.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just wanted to give you an example, which I think, Purnima, you will find interesting, which is that we all have heard of this generative AI, like ChatGPT and so on and so forth. Suppose I were to ask someone, okay, I'll give you 45 minutes. Tell me at the end of it, how does generative AI work? What happens? How does it actually work? Well, there's no textbook. You won't find a teacher. There is no curriculum which has even recognized or seen that word. So what should you do? Well, the only thing you can do is go to Google, which I did. If you go to Google, Google doesn't teach you anything, but Google will tell you where you might find that information. And then you can go and what happens in this particular case is you'll find that there are some very nicely written blogs available, which describes how exactly it works, and with examples and this and that. People have done all of that. So at the end of 45 minutes, if that person comes back and he's talking sensibly about how generative AI works, then my contention is we don't care whether he learned it or he knew it or whatever. What we care about is the end result. I told him, come back in 45 minutes and tell me about how generative AI worked. He came back in 45 minutes and he told me. Therefore, whatever method he used is okay.
So you think that Google search should be, or any search engine should be taught?
Well, you can't teach them. You can't teach a search engine. But what you can do is to find out if people are able to learn by themselves. That's quite easy to measure. And what I'm trying to say, which is going to be a big jump for the education system, is that you simply find out, can the learner learn? Does he or she have the ability to learn adequately? If the answer is yes, then you're not bothered with how they are doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This is, I think, worth thinking about in today's world, because if you have a carpenter who comes and says, "Ma'am, there's a new kind of wood glue because of which you don't need any nails." Now, you're not going to say, "Where did you learn this? In which school did they teach you this?" Will you? Because you'll assume that he just found it on Google. And he's tried it, hopefully, and he's not experimenting with you. so that's how knowing is going to be. If you look up maps, you get into Uber in India, for example. I've met drivers who don't actually know how to read a map at all, but they're driving Ubers and they're using the map because they simply see an arrow and the arrow tells them where to go, and they just keep following that and they reach where they. So now if you ask that driver, do you know where the railway station is? The driver will say, no, I don't know. Can you take me to the railway station? Yes, I can. That's the big difference.
Yeah.
I would have actually liked to take this question to the other panelists also, but we are running a little short on time. So I'll just quickly move on to the next question. Dr. Simi, you brought in the higher education system. So I just want you to know your thoughts to elaborate on that. How do you think the traditional education systems should adapt to the concept of lifelong learning? Again, in the context of this internet era.
Right. So I think, Sean, there are multiple different ways in which, whether we like it or not, it's already permeated. We heard the educationists talking about Chat GPT. We just about a week back, I was in a conversation with some IIT professors, and they were saying that, earlier we used to kind of check for plagiarism, but now what do you do, because every single assignment is kind of so breezy, it's similar, and it's coming from Chat GPT. So how do you assess and how do you segregate knowing from learning? Exactly what is like the shift that we want to make, and is it really important? So while yes, it is important that whatever is being taught in these institutes needs to be kind of internalized, needs to be applied to workplaces, needs to be kind of like put either into a product or a service or something that we are doing. So the only way to kind of go around that is to basically look into methodologies and pedagogies that have not been thought of earlier. So, for example, we used to kind of think about examination, which would have maybe 70% of theory, which was knowledge, as compared to a practical, which was maybe 30%, which was application of that knowledge and a skill that maybe in some cases it was a skill in case of an engineer or a doctor performing certain things. Now I think the 70% is going to get shrunken and is going to perhaps reverse. So maybe only 30% of the emphasis needs to be given to the fact that where did you retrieve information, was that information actually relevant, and once that, and how did you organize that information so that it was relevant to the question that you were trying to answer. And 70% of it has to be on actual observable skills and observable kind of behaviors that you kind of put forward. So that is where I said that there's going to be a drastic change that is coming through, and this is going to be something that will kind of emerge slowly, but that's where I think we are kind of leading to. I don't know if I kind of made any sense, but that's where I felt that that we are kind of going towards.
I would like to take my next question to Jayashree first, and then also to Dr. Mitra. How does the balance between deep domain knowledge and interdisciplinary understanding, between inter-domain kind of understanding, how does this balance play into lifelong learning, especially self-directed lifelong learning?
So connecting to, I just want to connect to the learning and knowing part of it first. I think when we say I know it, and it just reminds me of the, kind of different layers to it, that I remember something, I understand something, I'm able to apply, I'm able to create, like just Bloom's taxonomy, whole range of this. And if you want to take the learner from just the knowing to learning, I see these 4 steps in the ladder where the learner is either taking his or her journey, or the facilitator is taking the learner through that journey. So when I feel when we're looking at this interdisciplinary and domain specific, there is a deeper journey in all of these layers in one specific area, whether it is microbiology or astrophysics or any of these domains. And we especially see the scientists spending their whole lifetime just looking into galaxies or looking into one object and going deeper into understanding that domain. When we look at application of this, and the example that comes to my mind is all around climate change mitigation. It's not about just one domain's expertise that is there, but you're now looking into so many different areas and so many different expertise in different domains that come together for application to solve a problem, to solve something that is really relevant, or to even fulfill one's curiosity. So when there is application with a specific goal, and again connecting to what Purnima said, and we kind of reiterated a few times, if there is a goal in mind, then all of these domain expertise come together to solve that. And that is where from knowing to learning the entire journey is for a person. And there are multiple such examples when we can look at, the agriculture science, or if we look at what we were able to, the last pandemic and the solutions that we were coming up with. All of these are examples of when there is need for applying the expertise of different domains come together. And there's need for both. I mean, one cannot be, it's not either or, it's and depending on what the situation is and what the goal is, it all comes together. But it's important that the learner has gone through all 4 steps multiple times in their learning journey to be able to apply this. Like Dr. Mitra said, that have you really looked up how to put the nail, or do you know it? Like, have you experienced it? Have you created it? Have you failed? And then you've learned from that. So all of that has to happen to have the confidence in being able to apply that when there is need to apply it. So that's what I would say, when I see this domain specific and deeper understanding to application, that is how I would like to connect it.
Dr. Mitra?
Yeah, well, I kind of agree with most of what Jayashree is saying, provided it is an area which requires domain expertise. So, for example, if you have to carry out let's say an operation to remove a tonsil, then there is a set and established procedure. So you could have learned it in college, or you could even look it up. And there'll probably be a YouTube video which explains to you how it's done. Either way, you're all right. You don't need to do anything further than that. However, as her example of climate change came, if it was a question on, a certain aspect of climate change, then you're not going to find it written down in a textbook somewhere. So now you have to actually go interdisciplinary. You can't go interdisciplinary in a library. Just think about it, okay? How do you do interdisciplinary in a library? You are given a problem in science, in chemistry. Will you go to the sociology shelves to look for an answer? You won't. But if you use the internet will take you to sociology if it has to. This is the great positive development that we've all lived through. We don't actually realize that that's what we're doing. So if you ask a question to a search engine, it doesn't care about which box it's in, which subject it's in. It spreads across all of everything that people know and finds out what might be relevant. It is an absolutely incredibly good educational medium. Okay, no university, no teacher can come anywhere near it. But the question is, can we handle it properly? Can the learner handle it properly? The answer I found in the village experiments 20 years ago was that if they are in groups, they can. If they're alone, the internet can lead them completely astray. So this is something that we have to realize that we need to apply when we are using the internet.
I think I just want to add, I really agree with this last point what Dr. Mitra said, that there needs to be a collaboration of different domain expertise. And whether it is on internet or in real life, and people from different disciplines who have deeper understanding of this need to come together to solve something. So they really resonate with that point, Dr. Mitra.
Right. And I also wanted to make an observation, Dr. Jeshi and Dr. Mitra, that the quality of the questions that you ask is also very important. The same question may be asked by 2 different people in 2 different ways and will get, absolutely different results, because knowledge of how information systems work, the kind of keywords that they search with, how do they link it up, all of that is extremely important for us to kind of, give out quality questions so that the search engines search for relevant information, which we can kind of utilize. Again, I would say one more aspect is there that when we look at Google kind of, ranks according to maybe how many times that particular keyword has been searched. But that does not mean that that is authentic information. I think user rating that you see in MOOCs or in certain other forums, that is extremely important. Why do we go to a Reddit or a Quora when there is a Google? So the answer lies in the fact that how close it is to the authentic information that a learner is seeking.
Right. This is such a fascinating discussion, and I would have loved to go on a little more deep diving into it, but then we are running short on time. So I just want to get all of your thoughts on the final question for tonight. What, according to you, is the future of lifelong learning given the emerging technologies? And now it's not just internet, it's ChatGPT, generative text, and all other AI that's coming up every day. What is the future of lifelong learning? I want to take quick 2 to 3 minute thoughts from each one of you. Purnima, if you can please start with you. I think Purnima just got disconnected. Jayashree, would you like to take that question? What is the future of lifelong learning in this internet era?
This is something I keep wondering, that last 10 years we've seen so much change. In the next 10 years, there is going to be a lot more. So I think one is that this is a need for us to continue to stay at the forefront, continue to be the learners ourselves. And also we really need to be adaptable, open, and be okay with the change, because it is going to happen. And the more we are open and the more we are embracing this with open arms in as a learner, I think it's going to be easier for as educators for ourselves, and also as learners for ourselves. And I would not say the students are on the other side, which everybody is together in this. So I think the future is going to be completely based on how adaptive we are and how open we are about this. So I think that's just in a nutshell, and then we can see multiple examples in terms of how it's going to help us. And the earlier conversation we just had on keeping self and looking at all three domains of our physical, our emotional, and our cognitive needs that are going to be fulfilled only when we look at three more circles around us, which is first is self. That is personal need to keep ourselves motivated, engaged, and find a purpose in what we're doing. Our relationship with people and our society, which is the our society domain. And the third one is just the global domain. That is just a need to stay connected. It's also think beyond ourselves and not just be restricted to what I need for today, but what my next generation needs for tomorrow. And I think it's three domains with keeping yourself in the center. All of this combined is what decides what the future is going to be. And the only way that is possible is that we are open, we are adaptable, and we are embracing this change with open arms.
Thank you. Purnima, your quick 2 minute take on what's the future of lifelong learning in this era?
Quick, very few lines. Again, lifelong learning is not a sprint; it's a marathon. We just talked about it. It's a journey that we need to continue, and it's just about that one needs to be a lifelong learner to stay relevant in this ever evolving world. So I would say it's the need, and it's not the need of the hour, it's the necessity that is going to really create the next generation of innovators. So that's my final thought on the subject. This is an evolving world. This will continue to evolve.
May I request you for your closing thoughts to summarize the overall discussion?
I've got the general gist of it. What I hear the panelists saying is, first of all, that we need to know exactly what relationship we want between learning and knowing. Not what relationship there is, but what relationship we want between learning and knowing. We could have at one end of the spectrum, learning without knowing anything at all. That's just looking stuff up. At the other end of the spectrum, you could have knowing without learning. And mind you, think about it, that too is looking things up. Okay, a schoolboy in England once told me this beautiful line. He said, on the internet, we know before we learn. Okay, now that is, I think, the hallmark of the next generation to come. A generation that knows even before it has learned. So what is it that we should be looking for as guidelines for this generation? I think there's only one thing we can do. The rest of it they have to do on their own. The one thing that we can do is to focus on how to ask the right question. The answers are no longer important because the answers are everywhere, okay? ChatGPT will give you an answer, Google will give you maybe the same answer or another answer. If you look harder, you'll find the third answer, whatever. Answers everywhere. But where are the questions? Who makes the questions? And how do they make the questions? I think if we can address this issue, then we would still be in a position to produce a guideline for the generation that is immersed in lifelong learning and the internet.